In this webinar, I will speak about the plant checks, when plant checks move from place of destination to border control post or control points from January 2022. I will give you some information about border control posts, including the minimum requirements, infrastructure, fees, and biosecurity. And lastly, I will give you an introduction into control points, including the requirements. And lastly, I will summarise the differences between control points and BCPs. So just to recap on the import phasing that hopefully a lot of you are familiar with. So due to COVID and to provide businesses with more time, we announced a revised timetable for the phased import regime. As many of you are aware, since the 1st of January 2021, there has been a requirement for pre-notification and phytosanitary certificates for high priority plants and plant products. From the 1st of January 2022, checks on these high priority goods will move from places of destination to border control post or control points. In addition, at the start of January 2022, all regulated plants and plant products will also need to be pre-notified on the relevant IT system and have a phytosanitary certificate. And the last phase will occur on the 1st of March 2022. And in the last phase, an increased number of physical checks will be carried out on regulated plants and plant products occurring at BCPs or control points. Just to give you an update on the place of destination scheme or the pod scheme. So DEFRA's pod scheme will be closed at the end of this year, so at the end of December 21. The scheme was introduced as a temporary measure to enable the performance of checks of EU imports of high priority plants and plant products whilst the border infrastructure was expanded. Checks on BCPs and control points are a legislative requirement under our official control regulation, which is why the scheme cannot continue. And based on trade feedback from the pod scheme, we are looking to see how we can take forward some of the best practice learned from the pod scheme into our BCPs and control points. We do recognise that the revised import control timeline and consequent delayed launch of BCP facilities may have caused some unease. We can assure you that these sites have been designated and built from the ground up to efficiently and safely handle your goods. The government has invested over £700 million for border infrastructure, staff and technology in Great Britain to ensure these facilities are running smoothly. BCPs have long since been managed to import inspections of goods from non-EU countries and are an essential component of the UK's biosecurity regime. In order to be designated as a BCP, there are stringent requirements in place that must be met for these sites to qualify. These strict requirements mean that biosecurity will be maintained and consignments will be handled carefully by knowledgeable BCP staff and plant health inspectors. And these minimum requirements include a sufficient number of suitably qualified staff to oversee operations, premises and facilities appropriate to the nature of the volume of the consignment, equipment to enable the performance of checks, including access to Wi-Fi and import IT systems, arrangements in place to prevent risks of cross-contamination and compliance with biosecurity standards. There is not a set number or definition for each requirement. It is based on what is reasonable and required for each site, depending on the import volume and commodity types. For example, a sufficient number of staff will not have a number limit. The definition will be based on what is necessary to meet operations and inspections. To comply with biosecurity standards, BCPs must also provide for an area for unloading with appropriate cover, inspection rooms or areas, storage rooms or areas, washing facilities, for example, toilets and sinks. The requirements ensure the safety of each consignment and the quality of each facility. In order to be designated as a BCP, there's a rigorous assessment of each application by the competent authorities, including HMRC, Border Force and DEFRA officials. Potential BCP operators must include documentary evidence to support designation. There are also numerous site visits conducted by competent authorities throughout the build, and this includes a final site visit at the end to verify compliance. Each facility is assessed based on the commodity type they have applied to manage. For example, plant-designated BCPs are assessed based on the criteria set to manage plant and plant products. If a BCP operator has applied to manage both animal and plants products, they must ensure they meet the right requirements and that everything is carried out in a biosecure manner. Most BCP facilities will be ready for January 2022. We have had sufficient resource and staff to meet demand since the 1st of January 21, when checks on high priority plants from the EU began. As I mentioned earlier, BCPs have long since been used to manage import inspection of goods from non-EU countries, so we know that they can manage high volumes. Also, because BCP's stringent requirements to qualify, designation audits are conducted to ensure sites could handle necessary volumes with the appropriate contingencies built in. AFA staff and resources will be allocated flexibly based on the volumes and capacity needs at each port. This means that if one BCP is experiencing increased volumes on a Saturday, for example, additional resources will be allocated to manage that influx. And lastly, not every consignment will be selected for an inspection. Inspections are conducted on a risk basis, which means that only a certain number of goods will be selected, which I'll discuss a bit later in the presentation. Most BCPs can unload 6 or more vehicles at a time with ample space, and in exceptional circumstances, AFA can decide to move consignment to an alternative inspection location. Since 2020, DEFRA has doubled the BCP workforce to meet the increased volume demand inspected in line with the GB's phased import regime. For example, AFA doubles its workforce in 2021 by hiring 180 new plant health and seed inspectors, with another recruitment campaign underway for 150 more. The new hires will help manage the increased capacity expected in January 2022. All the staff hired to work at the BCPs are trained to handle plants and plant products, with import inspectors conducted in accordance with ISO standard 17020. ISO accreditation ensures inspections are conducted to a consistent standard across BCPs, including a rigorous inspector training program covering all aspects of the inspection process. AFA is audited regularly by the UK Accreditation Service to ensure their import procedures comply to all ISO standard requirements. And while we know that wait times are constantly on everyone's mind, plant health inspectors use an automated IT system which alerts them when goods are declared. This system allows inspectors to quickly respond and prepare for inspection before the consignment arrives. It also produces analytics linked to volumes and risks, which allows AFA to allocate resources based on the data. One of our top priorities is biosecurity and safety. Biosecurity and cleanliness are built into the minimum BCP requirements to ensure your consignment are protected from cross-contamination. BCP facilities must provide temperature-controlled areas, dedicated inspection and biosecure detention areas, and have in place extensive cleaning protocols. BCPs will also be managed under a separate, isolate, contain, clean framework. And this means that there will be a physical separation between each type of product received for inspection. This separation is maintained through the sampling, inspection, and return to original pallet process. Isolate means that if any biosecurity concerns are detected on the samples, the infected product will be immediately isolated from other products by placing it into a quarantine area. And contain means that depending on the issue affecting that product, various containment measures will be employed to minimise the potential risks of pests or disease escaping. These will include refrigerating the storage area and enveloping the product in a pallet shroud. The last step in the framework is cleaning, which means there must be adequate and appropriate cleaning to remove any contaminant. This framework ensures that all goods are inspected safely and that there isn't a risk of diseases spreading. Other infrastructure requirements will also ensure your consignments are safe. For example, each facility is fitted with quality sealed floors, biosecure seals, and drainage systems. Risk-based checks. Not every consignment will be selected for an inspection. EU commodities have been risk assessed and most consignments are subject to lower inspection rates than consignments from non-EU countries. This means that if your consignment was not selected for inspection and it has cleared customs, it can move to its final destination. AFA is regularly assessing its inspection information, such as interception data. And inspectors have detailed and up-to-date knowledge of risk profiles for each consignment. And this means that inspectors can prioritise inspections on higher risk consignments during busy times to avoid delays. Moving on to comms. Based on feedback, we know there are a lot of questions from trade on the lack of guidance or communication on BCPs. I just want to add that we are delivering a focused campaign later in the summer to inform about all aspects of BCPs. This includes how they will work, how goods are checked, with accompanying online guidance. We have created a new section on the Plant Health Portal focusing on BCPs. And this will include, at a later date, video tours and images to show how processes work and guidance traders ask for. Towards year end, we'll also be running more webinars like this one for trade to join and ask questions. We will also be reminding you of the steps you will need to take to carry on importing from the EU from January 2022. We know that port fees is one of the most important concerns right now. Other than the BCPs run by the UK government, for example, the inland BCP at Sevington, BCP usage fees, as distinct from plant health inspection fees, are set by commercial operators of those facilities. DEFRA has no control over the level of those fees, but we continue to engage with the commercial BCP operators and will encourage publication of BCP usage fees in a transparent manner as soon as possible. That was the conclusion of the BCP section of this presentation. So I'm now going to move on to control points. Control points are inland inspection points which operate under customs supervision. Control points have the same function as a border control post. They are part of the UK's border infrastructure together with BCPs and need to provide the same biosecurity safeguards as a BCP and enable movements away from the border under customs control. The BCP requirements that I went through earlier in the presentation will be the same for control points, and also the designation process is the same as well. This means that control point applications will go through a rigorous assessment process as well as an audit, but any business can apply. Only plants or plant products are expected at control points. Plant health controls will be carried out by the Animal and Plant Health Agency in England and Wales. SASA will undertake control in Scotland, and Forestry Commission is responsible for controls of wood products and isolated bark. Consignments must enter via a port with a BCP approved for plants before travelling onto a control point. Inland sites are under custom controls. External temporary storage facility authorisation will be required, and you will need to meet several additional custom requirements to be granted authorisation. And lastly, transport to the site will be under customs control, and you will not be permitted to unload goods during the journey from the border to the control point. Now I'll go into more about the facilities and the checks at the control points. Control point facilities must comply with a range of conditions, including signage and security at the temporary storage as part of the temporary storage custom authorisation. It will also need to be biosecure and safe for consignments. This means that there must be temperature control zones, biosecure detention areas, and strict cleaning protocols. It is crucial that there are quarantine areas and that pests of risky consignments are isolated and kept separate. There will be enough inspectors to carry out checks at both BCPs and control points. When submitting your pre-notifications, your application status on IFAS will indicate whether your consignment has been selected for physical inspection. If your goods are selected for inspection, they should move to the inspection area within the control point. A single business can operate as a control point, and it is at the operator's discretion to then grant approval to other businesses to use that facility. DEFRA will not be involved in this process, including overseeing contracts. And quickly on the designation. To apply, you will need to send an email to DEFRA in England and Wales and Scottish Government in Scotland to get an application. And there are email addresses that we can share in the chat. There is no deadline to apply, but we anticipate that designation can take several months but the designation time will depend on each application. I'll now move on to the differences and similarities between control points and border control posts. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of similarities between control points and BCPs. This includes a facility must meet the minimum requirements for BCP under the official control regulations, as well as being custom authorised. The difference is that control points are located away from the border and goods are moved from the original point of entry under customs supervision. There are currently 163 locations designated for plants, and 34 of these are control points. BCPs conduct checks on all goods, including products of animal origins, and the only commodity that can be checked at control points will be plants. Also, BCPs will have inspectors present on site at busy locations, while inspector cover for the control points will be allocated once arrival of goods for inspection have been confirmed. BCPs have several advantages over control points, particularly in relation to staff cover and size of operation, which are some of the reasons to select inspections at BCPs over control points.